All right, here is the little bit of a review for Chapter 2. I'm going to do all the problems that I've highlighted in purple. This is going to be a little longer than yesterday because there's a couple more problems. But if you are asked to identify the vertex and X-intercepts. Guys, when you have X-intercepts, you're setting y equal to 0, all you're going to do is factor. But in this first case, to find the vertex, anybody remember that little formula to find the vertex? X equals negative
B over 2a.
Yep.
Wait, what page is this on?
Chapter 2, second page. X equals negative b over 2a, okay? So in the case of 3x squared minus 12x plus 11, what is your b?
12.
What kind of 12?
Negative.
Negative 12. So you have negative 12 divided by 2 times 3. Everybody with me? So I have 12 divided by 6. So the x part of my vertex is what number? 2. So if I found the x part of my vertex is 2, so I know my vertex is at 2 comma something, how do I find the y?
Plug it in.
You plug it in. So you have 3 times 2 squared minus 12 times 2 plus 11. Remember, your midterm is 40 questions, multiple choice, and you can use a calculator. So 2 squared is 4, right? And 4 times 3 is 12. Then I have minus, what's 12 times 2? 24 plus 11. So you just go left to right. 12 minus 24 is negative 12 plus 11 is what? Negative 1. So your vertex is at 2 comma negative 1. Now to find x-intercepts, we would take our function 3x squared minus 12x plus 11 and set it equal to what? 0. And then what do we do? Factor. So a is not 1. We have to say a times c. So 3 times 11 is 33. What are the factors of 33? That could multiply to give me 33, but add to give me negative 12. Anything?
11 and 3.
Okay, is that going to give us negative 12? So then what would we have to use? If it doesn't factor pretty, what do we do? Not the square root. This is a quadratic function and it doesn't factor pretty, so use what formula?
Negative b over 2.
Oh, the quadratic.
The quadratic formula. A is 3,
X equals
B is negative 12, and C is 11. So you'd have X equals negative B, right? Negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A is 3. C is what? 11. All over 2 times A. So if I have a negative 12, that just gives me 12. Plus or minus, what is negative 12 squared? 144. Minus, what's 12 times 11? 132 all over 6. So 12 plus or minus, what's 144 minus 132? 12 all over 6, right? Okay, can I break 12 up? Yes. What can you break 12 up into? Okay, so this is the same as 4 times 3.
Yeah.
Square root of 4 is? 2. So you have 12 plus or minus 2 root 3 over 6. Can we cancel anything?
Yeah.
Yes. 6 goes into 12 2 times. What happens with 2 and 6? This becomes a 1, this becomes a 3.
Oh, okay.
So it's 2 plus or minus root 3 over 3. You guys have a calculator. You should be able to find intercepts if it doesn't factor pretty. If it's a quadratic and it doesn't factor pretty, use the quadratic formula. Because if I have 2 over 6, that simplifies 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 6 3 times. Good question. All right, if I have a vertex and a point, guys, if you have a vertex and a point, you have the formula y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. We've talked about this a bunch. If they give you the vertex, what is my vertex in that formula?
The X and the H and the K.
H and the K. And the point is the X and the Y. So you just literally plug in. So for Y, I'm going to put -3 equals, I don't know what A is. That's what we're trying to find out. So I have X, which is what? 2 minus H, so that's 1 squared minus 4. So if we solve this, -3 equals, what's 2 minus 1? 1. And 1 squared is?
1.
So it's just A minus 4. Now what do I do?
Plus 4.
Add 4 to both sides. So my A equals what number? 1. So when I write my formula, you have f of x or y, it doesn't matter, equals, my A is 1. Do I have to write it? Excuse me? No, you don't have to write 1. So I have x minus 1 squared minus 4. Just guys, I'm not giving you all of these. You need to know this. This isn't a formula that you're going to be given. If I describe the transformations again, we did this yesterday. You guys should be really good. For both of these, which family are we talking about? Cubic. Okay, so this negative out in front means what? Reflect over x. Good. Reflect over x. What does this plus 7 mean? Left 7. And what does this minus 2 mean? Down 2. Perfect. Over here?
Right 1.
Hold on. Hold on. Go left to right. What's the first thing mean? Reflect over x. Good. What does the minus 1 inside mean? Right 1. And what does plus 3 at the end mean? Good. Good. All right, if you're finding the zeros, if you are finding x-intercepts, if you are finding roots, blah, 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 what are we doing? If you're finding solutions, zeros, x values, roots, what are we doing? You're setting it equal to 0. You're going to factor. So you have x to the 4th minus x cubed minus 2x squared equals 0. When in doubt, guys, factor. What do they all have in common that I can take out? X squared. So I take out my x squared. I'm left with x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. Can I factor any more?
Yes.
Okay, so I have x squared on the outside. What times what? Gives me a -2 when I multiply, but a -1 when I add. X plus 1, x minus 2. Good. Now what do I do with each little piece? So x squared equals 0. X plus 1 equals 0. X minus 2 equals 0. Take the square root, right? So I got x equals plus minus 0. Is that really a thing, plus minus 0? No. But I have 0 2 times, so what does that mean?
It's
Multiplicity,
Yeah.
if it asks for it. But here I have x equals what? -1. And here I have x equals +2. When in doubt, folks, factor.
So if you do have a plus or minus, it technically does count as 2.
It is 0. It means if you graphed it, is it going to go through at 0 or is it going to touch and turn? Touch and turn. That'll go. All right. This one, guys, I'm not going to work this whole thing out. At the end, if we have some time and you want me to, I will. But if you're finding the polynomial function, they're giving you the answers. They're telling you here, x equals -2, x equals 1, x equals 1, and x equals 5. And they want you to go backwards. They want you to tell me what the whole big polynomial looks like at the beginning. So if I was going to move this -2 over here, what does my parenthesis look like? X plus 2. If I move this 1 over here, what does my parenthesis look like? X minus 1. I move this one over, it becomes
X minus 1.
good. And then I move this over, it becomes.
X minus 5.
And now what would we do? You combine them together. You just foil the whole thing. I would foil these two first, then these two, and then combine them more. Again, if you want me to do this at the end, I will. This is worked out on the answer sheet. But all this is you're going backwards. You're finding the big, long function, so you just have to be careful with foiling. That's not anything terribly awful. All right, when they ask for the remainder theorem, what does that mean?
It's looking for you to do like synthetic division.
You're going to do synthetic division, and the only thing they care about is the remainder. They're telling me here what to put in my little box in the corner. So I'm going to put negative 4 right here. And then I have to list out all of the coefficients of the variable. And I have to make sure there's no what?
There's no space.
There's no space. So the first coefficient I see is 2, t to the 5th power. So now what's the coefficient for the 4th power?
Negative 5.
-5. What is the coefficient for t to the 3rd power? 0. What is the coefficient for t to the 2nd power? 0. What is the coefficient for t to the 1st power?
-8.
And what is the constant? 20. Does anyone have any questions about where I got those numbers from? Remember, if it has to go in descending order and it has to stay in order, there has to be a placeholder for every single power. So now I just bring down the 2, and then how do I synthetically divide?
You
Multiply to the corner, so 2 times -4 is -8, and I'm going to add down. -5 and -8 is -13. So now I'm going to multiply to the corner. What's -13 times -4?
positive.
Ooh.
It is positive 52. And now I add down. Oh no, God bless you. So I have 52 times 4. Again, you guys have a calculator on your test.
208.
52 times 4 is what?
208.
Okay, so positive 208. Then I add down, so 208.
Negative.
Negative 2.
Thank you. So negative 208 times -4 is?
832.
Is it?
Yup.
Okay, 832. Then I add down. What's 832 and -8?
824. Or negative 824.
No, it's positive.
Positive 824. Then I multiply. So what's 824 times -4?
Negative 3,296.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, and then add 20 to that.
That was wrong.
Huh?
3,316.
Negative 3296 plus 20.
3276.
Negative 3276.
Oh, God.
Remainder theorem means what's the remainder? Guys, who cares that that number's big? Just because it's not 20 or 7, you guys are like, oh, I did something wrong. Don't automatically assume you did something wrong. You have a calculator. Rely on the fact that you understand how to synthetically divide and throw stuff in the calculator. Okay?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, next part. If you are going to determine if something is a factor or not, if we have this, you want to determine if something is a factor, what do I do? How do I figure this out?
You synthetically divide.
Okay, so how do I do that? What do I figure out? What's going to go in the little corner?
4.
Why is it 4?
Because it says it.
Not because it says it. Why is it positive 4?
Because you solve.
You set that equal to 0. Good. So then how do I find, what are my coefficients? You are so smart. 1, 4, negative 25, negative 28. Now let's make sure we don't have anything that we messed up before we start doing this. I start off with x cubed, yes?
Yep.
So then do I have a space for x squared?
Yep.
Do I have a space for just x?
Yep.
Do I have my constant?
Yep.
Okay, we're good to go. Bring down your 1. I multiply to the corner. What's 1 times 4?
4.
4. And I'm going to add down. 4 and 4 is 8. Multiply to the corner. 8 times 4. 32. Add down. What's 32 and negative 25? Positive 7. Okay. Multiply to the corner. 7 times 4 is 28. Negative 28, positive 28 is? What did you just show me? That x minus 4 is a factor. The reason it is a factor is because our remainder is what?
0.
Very good. All right, now guys, there is going to be a question on your test, probably that says use long division. Do I know, or does Ms. Perez know if you use long division or not?
Yes.
I do?
No.
How would I know that?
Multiple choice.
It's multiple choice. So if you get to a long division problem and you're just, I still can't do this, okay, you can use synthetic division. How would I use synthetic division in this problem?
You said 3x minus
I set 3x minus 2 equal to 0, so in my little corner, I would have positive 2/3. Is that a fraction?
Yes.
Yes. That's okay, though. I'm going to use long division to show you how to do this, but there are other ways to figure it out when you have a multiple choice test.
Do you want me to come back?
We have 24x squared minus x minus 8. Remember, we have to make sure there's no gaps, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. So 3 into 24x cubed. So 3x times what gives me 24x cubed? 8x.
Where?
I'm sorry, it should be squared. Sorry. I'm like, wait, what? So we're going into squared, so it's 8x, right?
Yeah.
Put that above my x. Now I multiply. What is 8x times 3x? 24x squared. What's 8x times negative 2? Negative 16x. Before I can subtract, what do I have to do with that minus sign? Distribute, distribute, distribute. So negative x plus 16x is 15x. What happens to my 24x squareds? Cancel out. What do I do with negative 8? Drop it down. God bless. Now we do it all over again. 3x into 15x is what?
5.
Positive 5. So multiply. 3 times 5 is 15x. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. Before I subtract, what do I need to do? Distribute, distribute, distribute. So I'm left with 2 here, and my 15s cancel out.
So it's 2 over 3x minus 2.
2 over 3x minus 2. What sign goes in between the 5 and the 2 over 3x minus 2?
Plus.
A plus. Good. Why would we put a plus?
Because the 2 is positive.
Because it's positive. Good. All right, guys, when we talk about complex numbers, this is just like adding, subtracting, multiplying, all that with variables. The only thing we have to remember is I times I is I squared, which equals negative 1. Okay, what are we doing here? A lot of you guys messed up on this on your test. You foiled this. What are we doing to these two parentheses? We're adding them. So real goes with real, imaginary with imaginary. So 7 minus 4 is what? 3. 5i plus 2i is 7i. What's the real part of this number? 3. What's the imaginary part?
7.
That's it.
Done.
What are we doing here?
Multiply.
We're multiplying. So this is where we foil. 10 times 2 is 20. 10 times negative 3, negative 30i. Negative 8 times 2, negative 16i. 8i times negative 3i is positive 8 times 3, 24. And then I times I is I. As soon as I see I squared, what do? I cross off the I squared and I change this to a minus sign. So now I have my real parts and I have my imaginary parts. Real goes with real. What's 20 minus 24? Negative 4. And then negative 30 and negative 16.
Negative 46. I.
There you go.
Okay.
Remember that?
Yep.
Okay. Good, good, good. We done with that page? Oh, wow. Okay, find all the zeros. What does that mean?
Can we just do like a
Set it equal to 0.
oral test?
No. What do we do? What do we do when we find all the zeros?
You're solving.
You're solving. You're factoring. So you have x to the 5th, right? Plus x to the 4th, plus 5x cubed, plus 5x squared equals 0. First thing we always look for is
Something that.
G,
Oh, based
Yeah.
on fact.
GCF. What can I take out of all 4 of these?
X squared.
X squared. So I'm left with x cubed, right? Plus x squared plus 5x, yes? Plus 5 equals 0.
Yeah.
Okay? Now what? Why would we group? And I agree with you. Why? Because there's 4. So I'm going to group now. With my grouping, what can I take out of this first set of parentheses?
X squared.
So I'm going to take out an x squared.
5.
And what am I left with?
1 or X.
X plus 1. In the second group, I'm going to take out what, Sky? 5. And I'm left with x plus 1.
No. Yes.
Yes.
No. Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Sky, if you divide out 5, you're left with x plus 1, honey.
Is that a plus sign or a negative sign?
That's a plus sign. So what do I do with my leftovers, friends? Okay, so I have my x squared. Then I have my leftovers get their own parenthesis.
Yep.
Then I have my GCF here. I write it one time. X plus 1 equals 0. Now what do I do in each little piece?
Everything one
Set everything equal to what?
0.
0. So I have x squared equals 0. So x equals 0, right? I have x plus 1 equals 0. So x equals negative 1. And then I have x squared plus 5 equals 0.
Okay.
Square root of 5.
X squared equals negative 5, so that I do what to both sides?
Or root. No, X.
So x equals plus or minus I root 5.
Yeah.
If it says how are you want all the real solutions,
You just did the first two.
you just put the first two. If you want all of the solutions, you put all of them. All right, same thing here. What are they asking us to do? Find all the zeros. First thing we look for is G, C, F. No matter how they answer this question, every single time you guys are just going to factor. There's different ways you have to factor depending on what they give you. Is there a greatest common factor in all of these? No. So then the next thing we look to do is what?
Group it.
Group it. Let's see if we can group it.
Go.
What can I take out of the first?
X
X squared, and I'm left with what?
X
X minus 4. Okay, what can I take out of the second?
2.
Positive 2, and I'm left with what?
Thank you.
And I'm left with 3x minus 2. Well, wait a second. Does that work?
No.
No, that doesn't help us.
So do
So I got to think of another way that I can factor, okay? If I hear quadratic formula, I'm going to say, no, we can't do the quadratic formula here. Why is that?
Wait, you can
Because
factor
there's
it.
4.
You can do 2 outside and then 3x minus 2.
Right, but when you're grouping, the parentheses that you end up with need to be the same. They're not. So that's not going to work. How come I can't use the quadratic formula? It's not because there's 4 terms. Well, I mean, it kind of is, but quadratic, it has to be a what?
Quad.
Quadratic.
Formula. And there's
That's not a
two.
quadratic. It's a quad because there's 4 terms, but quadratic is the highest exponent is what?
2.
2. So this is when we're going to have to do our P over Q. What are the factors of this last number?
1 and 4.
1, 2, and 4, right?
Yeah.
So we got to find out which one of these works. I'm going to try 1, synthetically divide. 1, negative 4, 6, negative 4.
Oh yeah, right.
Yep. So then I multiply to the corner. 1 times 1 is 1. Negative 4 and 1 is negative 3. Negative 3 and 1 is
Negative
6 minus 3 is
3.
3 times 1 is.
3.
Is this going to work? No. Okay, try negative 1. 1, negative 4, 6, negative 4. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Negative 4, negative 1 is negative 5. Negative 5 and negative 1 is 5. 6 and 5 is this going to work? Nope. Okay, so let's try 2. 1, negative 4, 6, negative 4.
I remember why this much.
1 times 2 is
2.
2. Negative 4 and 2 is negative 2 and 2 is
4.
negative 4. 6 minus 4 is 2 times 2 is
4.
negative 4 and positive 4.
0.
Okay, so I know one of my factors is x equals 2. Now, I have a resulting polynomial here. What is it?
1.
1 what?
X squared
1x squared
minus
minus
2x
2x
plus
plus 2 equals 0. Can I factor this?
Yep.
I can.
Maybe.
type.
What are the factors of 2 that multiply to give me a positive 2 but add to give me negative 2?
Nothing.
Nothing. So if I get to this point and it doesn't factor, now what can I do?
You say it's wrong.
What do I say? What formula do I use if I can't factor a quadratic? So I have negative 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2. All over 2 times 1. So I have 2 plus or minus. What's negative 2 squared? 4 minus minus 8 over 2. 2 plus or minus, what's 4 minus 8?
Negative 4.
What's the problem here?
It's a negative
What's the square root of 4?
2.
2, and since there's a negative, it's what? So it's 2 plus or minus 2i over 2. Do you think that answer is going to be on the test?
No, ma'am.
No. What's the answer going to be?
It's gonna be
I.
1
1
plus or minus
plus or minus.
2i.
No, I.
Just I.
Why just I?
Because 2 divided by 2 is 1.
You guys have to, if you don't see it, you have to separate it. That 2 in the denominator goes to both terms. A lot of times when we simplify, you guys only simplify the first term. You have to simplify both. This becomes 1, and this becomes 1. Yes, that's a long problem, but nothing you guys can't handle.
How many of those? Well,
I have no idea how many of those are on the test.
Look at that. That's really long.
Okay, here we go. Complex numbers with division. There's one thing you have to remember with division, and everything else is super easy. What is that one thing? What are we not allowed to have in the denominator? An I. How do I get rid of that? By the complex what?
5 minus I.
5 minus I. It's the complex conjugate. Good job, Mia. So 5 minus I. Now this just becomes one huge multiplication problem. One on top, one on the bottom. Let's FOIL the top. 3 times 5. 15. 3 times negative I. Negative 3I. 2I times 5. Plus 10I. 2I times negative I. Negative 2I squared. As soon as I see that I squared, I cross it off. Change this to plus. Agreed?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to keep going with the numerator. I'm just going to clean it up because it's gross. What's 15 plus 2? 17. What's negative 3I and a positive 10I? Plus 7I. Good. Now we're going to do the exact same thing on the bottom. 5 times 5 is 25. 5I times negative I?
Negative 5.
Positive I times 5I?
Positive 5.
I times negative I?
Negative I squared.
I see I squared. I do what?
Cross
Cross it off. Change. This just becomes plus 1. What happens with the negative 5i and the positive 5i? They cancel out. That should happen every time. So I left with 26 on the bottom. If you don't have your i's cancel out, then you guys did something wrong. You got to fix it.
That's it.
That's it. All right. Let's go here. Solve this. X squared plus 48 equals 0. Solve this, guys.
Subtract 48.
Subtract 48.
Square root of.
X squared equals equals negative 48. Now what?
Square root both sides.
Square root both sides. So x equals, first of all, I put a plus or minus in front.
Plus or minus.
I see a negative. What immediately comes to mind?
I.
Can I break up 48 to a perfect square and a non-perfect square?
Yeah.
Yes. 16 times what?
4.
No.
Sorry. 6 hours.
16 times 3.
Yes.
So x equals, what is the square root of 16?
4.
So this becomes plus or minus 4i root 3. If you cannot simplify, if you cannot factor, something like that, you have to use what formula? The quadratic, okay? First thing I look to do here, take out a GCF. I can't. Then I see, okay, well, a is not 1, so 5 times 4 is 20. Are there factors of 20 that will multiply to give me 20, but add to give me negative 2?
No.
No. So I have to use what formula?
Quadratic.
A equals 5, B is negative 2, C is 4.
Theoretically, can I just do quadratic for every
Yep.
quadratic? Oh, nice.
Negative B, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times 5 times 4. All over 2 times 5. So I have 2 plus or minus, what's 2 squared?
4.
4 minus, what is 4 times 5?
4, 20.
20 times 4. Right?
Yup.
All over 10.
Yup.
So I have 2 plus or minus the square root of
76.
negative 76 all over 10.
Yup.
76 breakdown. If you guys don't know,
Yes.
divide by perfect squares.
Divide by 4.
If I divide 76 by 4, what do I get?
19.
Okay. So I can break this up into negative 1, 4 times 19, correct?
Yep.
So when I do that, I have 2 plus or minus. What is the square root of 4? 2. What's the square root of negative 1? I. So I plus or minus 2i root 19 over what?
Over 10.
Over 10. If you need to separate this, guys, so you can see it's 2 over 10 plus or minus 2I over 10 root 19.
Yep.
How does this simplify?
1 over 5.
This becomes 1 over 5,
1
and this
I.
becomes over 5. So it's 1 plus or minus I root 19 over 5.
Yeah.
Long problem, I know. Okay, if you want me to do this one, I could do it tomorrow or at the end here. I just want to make sure I get through every problem. This is the given polynomial. They want to know the polynomial. They gave me the zeros. When they gave me an imaginary zero, I also have to account for which one? I have 2. I have negative 2. Then they told me 2i. That means I also have to account for what? The negative. The conjugate. You always have to account for the conjugate. What is the conjugate of positive 2i? Negative 2i. So this is telling you x equals 2, x equals negative 2, x equals 2i, x equals negative 2i. So when I write my parentheses, because I'm going backwards, and I move this over here, this over here, this over here, this over here, my parenthesis looks like what? X minus 2. This one says x plus 2. This one says x minus 2i. This one says, and then what do? You foil it. I would foil these two, then get going. Okay. Confirm. All you're doing is, we'll look at this one. This to me is more important of the two. All right, they're giving you a function and they're giving you one of the zeros. They want you to find the other ones. So first of all, I see that this starts with x cubed, yes? That means I have how many answers? 3. So they told me one of them is x equals negative 2i. That means x also equals positive 2i. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply those two together. So I have x plus 2i, x minus 2i. So foil that. X times x is x times negative 2i, 2xi. 2i times x is positive 2xi. And then negative and positive 2i, negative 4i squared. As soon as I see I squared, I do what? Cross it off and put a plus. What happens with the positive and the negative 2xi? Cancel out. So what am I left with? X squared plus 4. What do I do? Does anybody remember what I do with x squared plus 4 to figure out what the other zero is? No. I have to do something with this and this. Yep, long division. Good. Very good, Emmy. So I have x squared plus 4 on the outside, and then on the inside I have x cubed plus 3x squared plus 4x plus 12. I don't have any gaps or anything, right? Okay, then let's do this. X squared into x cubed. X squared times what gives me x cubed? X. So I'm just going to put it right here above the x. Remember, keep everything in order. It's much easier. This should work out every single time that you do this, where you just get one little expression that you're going to then set equal to 0. So when I do this, I'm going to say x times x squared is x cubed, right? X times 4 is
4x.
So I'm going to put it underneath the 4x. Everybody see that? You can just put a 0.
Yeah.
What do I do before I subtract?
Distribute that.
Distribute the x. So the negative. Distribute. So I have positive 4x, negative 4x. Cancels out, right? 3x squared minus 0x squared is just 3x squared. And then what happens with my x cubes? And then what do I do with the 12? Drop it down. Again, first term into first term. X squared times what gives me 3x squared? What is it?
3.
Plus 3. So now I multiply. What's 3 times x squared? 3x squared. What's 3 times 4? Plus 12. Before I subtract, I distribute. Positive 12, negative 12? 0. 3x squared, negative 3x squared? 0. So I found out that the last 0 occurs at x plus 3. So how do I solve that? I say x plus 3 equals?
0.
So x equals
Negative 3.
-3. Good.
3 zeros are
Now, if you guys got to a question like that and you were just kind of over it, didn't know what to do, you're going to have multiple choice answers. So say one of the multiple choice answers said one of the x's was 3, another multiple A said this, B said x is -3. What could you do with those answers?
You can plug them in.
Not plug them in. What can you do with this and this to figure out if it's a factor or not? What do we do at the beginning? What?
Non-division.
Not long division. What's the easy one?
Oh.
What's the easy kind of division? Synthetic. You could put you could put 3 in the little corner, see if it works. Put -3 in the corner, see if it works. You don't have to do the long division because it's going to say use long division, whatever. I don't know if you are or not because it's a multiple choice test. Okay, I knew today was going to be the longest because it's the kind of the meat of what we've done. Tomorrow I'll go over 3 and I'll give you back your tests, and then we'll do 4 on Thursday. Sound good?